Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather on the 24th day of April now, 2021. I'm Dave Percy, meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. Up first, let's see, we've got on the hazardous weather graphics, we've got no watches, warnings, or advisories anywhere in the state here for the next day, probably couple of days, with high pressure holding over the interior and the storminess out over the Alaska Peninsula not potent enough to kick off any advisories or let alone warnings. And nice conditions for the next couple of days in the interior. In fact, here's a specific forecast for Anchorage, looking at about the same weather we saw today on Saturday for, again, Sunday and Monday. Temperatures about the same. Lows right around the frost point there, either side, depending on what part of town you're in. Temperatures still up into the upper 50s, some cases lower 60s, but starting to pick up some clouds Tuesday, Wednesday, into Thursday, so that'll affect the temperature on both ends, keeping it a little milder at night and maybe the lower to mid 50s or so during the afternoon hours. So really not much change. Dry conditions, fair weather for at least into the latter part of next week. Satellite imagery showing clear skies actually from just about the Arctic coast there, southward, Gulf of Alaska, also the Bering Sea east side there, north of that band of clouds across the Alaska Peninsula. That's into the Pribilofs and bringing the rain and wind into the central Aleutians to the Alaska Peninsula. And some clouds up around Kodiak Island, a little bit of light shower activity at Kodiak State Airport overnight, but generally just mostly cloudy today. And some lower clouds into southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay. Otherwise, good sunshine. A lot of clearing there over the Gulf of Alaska, as you have the Northeast Pacific, Dixon entrance westward and northward right into Canada. And again, into the northern Bering Sea. Some clouds, though, over the southwest coast and locally into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta up to St. Lawrence Island with a band of moisture there, but basically precipitation free. And winds kind of kicked up with that low center over the Alaska Peninsula. That's where the rain and heaviest rain and wind were today. And the wind was a little heavier than the precipitation. Dutch Harbor picked up or actually on Alaska, Dutch Harbor, on Alaska Island, about half an inch of rain in the last 12 hours. And Falls Pass, about 4/10 of an inch, with Cold Bay seeing peak wind gusts 54 miles per hour out of the southeast there, while, on Alaska, 52 mile an hour peak wind gusts, and then up around the Delta Junction area in the interior, afternoon breeze kicked up there to a 30 mile per hour wind gust or so, and about 25 in Fairbanks there, which suggests a little bit more wind than what that gradient's showing there, not mostly due to the heating of the daytime with temperatures rising in the 50s to mid 60s, and even upper 60s over areas of the southeast coast down south. Otherwise, for tonight, not much change. That low center stays pretty stationary around the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, frontal boundary across the Alaska Peninsula there. So periods of rain and breezy conditions, maybe a little lighter on the winds in the peak wind gust area than what you saw today. You could still see 35, 40 mile an hour gusts there, exposed areas of the southwest coast, specifically Cape Newenham, with a little bit better chance of shower activity along the outer coastline. Clouds dissipate, not much change, mostly clear and light winds over the interior from the Arctic coast down across the Panhandle, Prince William Sound, Kenai Peninsula. And then for tomorrow, not a lot of change. Low pressure still right near Falls Pass, or close enough to Falls Pass, Alaska Peninsula there, with showers along the southwest coast, increasing clouds maybe for the Yukon Delta, variably cloudy Seward Peninsula up to the northwest coast. Otherwise, no change in the interior. Sunshine, start to increase the winds on the eastern Beaufort Sea coast a little bit tomorrow afternoon, but light winds down across the Panhandle, mostly sunny, 50s to mid to upper 60s possibly over the interior. And the outlook for Monday, again, not much change. There is a tightening gradient there over the northeast interior as another high pressure builds there just west of Banks Islands, and then the kind of thermal trough over the west central interior. So I'm going to see an increase in the winds there with actually gale warnings developing along the eastern Beaufort Sea coast on the east side there, the far east side, Kaktovik Demarcation Point, Barter Island, those areas looking at gale force winds out of the east on Monday afternoon. Otherwise, could get a little breezy there along the Porcupine River down into the upper Yukon River there to about Eagle. And Breezy over the eastern Aleutians with showers, and that's about the only precipitation area there. Heaviest probably for Kodiak Island there, close to that frontal boundary. Periods of light rain, wind not much of a factor, mostly sunny with light winds over the Panhandle, or risk of some light shower activity trying to get into the eastern Copper River Basin there, but that's just maybe with that Arctic front. And for the lows tonight, 20s and 30s for the Panhandle, 20s and lower 30s for South Central Alaska, mid-30s Bristol Bay, upper 30s Kodiak Island, mid-20s Kuskokwim Valley and Copper River Basin, 20s and 30s in the central interior, single numbers and teens North Slope Arctic Coast, near 30 for the northern Bering Sea, and 19 at Shishmaref, and then the other side of the peninsula, 28 at Nome. And for the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, lower to mid-30s, mid-30s Pribilofs, mid-upper 30s for the Aleutians. Highs tomorrow, 55 to 65 or so for South Central Alaska, interior areas of the Kenai Peninsula, 50s, lower 60s, Copper River Basin. Same thing for the Panhandle. Lower 40s, Kodiak Island, near 50 for Bristol Bay. Along the coast, away from the water though, 55 to 60, lower 60s, Kuskokwim Valley. Mid-60s there for the Fairbanks area over to Northway and Tok, and 40s and 50s south of the Brooks Range, with 20s to upper teens for the highs for the eastern Arctic coast there, mid and eastern Arctic coast, otherwise 42 for Nome, 35 St. Lawrence Island, 50s lower or 40s to lower 50s there, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta in the 40s, lower to mid Aleutians and the Pribilofs, mid 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Lows the following morning, 20s and 30s southern Alaska, mostly in the 30s above freezing there for the southeast coast, upper 20s Copper River Basin, 25 to 33 central interior, and 15 to 20 for the Brooks Range, North Slope and Arctic coast, single numbers, mid 20s St. Lawrence Island, and in the mid 30s for the Aleutians, near 40 for the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak. Highs on Monday, mid 60s.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First line weather graphic we've got for Sunday morning showing IFR there along the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Bay area up to most of Nunivak Island, covering the Pribilofs down to the north shore of Unalaska Island, and then along the Alaska Peninsula and across just south of Sitkinak and the Trinity Islands, marginal VFR, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, portion of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, northern Bering Sea, remainder of the Aleutians, right up across Seward Peninsula looks pretty marginal, as well as the northwest coast, and say Kotzebue on up to Cape Lisburne. VFR for the remainder of the state, all the way into the Gulf of Alaska, Panhandle included, to the eastern interior, and northward there into the Arctic Ocean. And then for the afternoon, we've got, let's see, afternoon, not much change in the interior, stays VFR, really just about all areas from the Arctic coast down to the Gulf of Alaska, Panhandle, marginal VFR, Kodiak Island, and Bristol Bay with IFR from around Dillingham to Togiak Bay into the southwest mountains and the Kuskokwim Bay area to southern Nunivak Island, across the Pribilof, St. Paul, St. George, down to roughly Adak and more so for Atka, and some VFR farther to the west, and then marginal for the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula. Northern Bering Sea through the Strait, most of the Seward Peninsula, a little lessened in the morning hours, and the northwest coast. Still Kotzebue looks kind of marginal up to just south of Point Lay. And for Monday morning, not a lot of change here. Southern Kodiak Island, IFR, Alaska Peninsula, Eastern Aleutians, Pribilofs, all IFR, up to just along the southwest coast there, and marginal Nunivak Island northward across the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island, and the northwest coast, and Noatak Valley there, and a little farther northeast there along the western Arctic coast. And otherwise, VFR in the interior. We've got marginal VFR now creeping northward to the southern portion of Kenai Peninsula and trying to spill into Kamishak Bay, but still VFR for Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound and just about everywhere else. And for the afternoon Monday, we've got some marginal VFR now showing up there along the eastern Alaska Range, possibly, and it'd be mostly on the north slopes there. VFR south of the mountains to the Gulf again, good VFR Panhandle, a little bit of marginal VFR possible now for the Seward Peninsula north sides, Shishmaref, Teller, on up to Cape Lisburne, Point Hope. Otherwise, everywhere else, VFR in the interior, IFR, Eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and Kodiak Island, marginal for Fognak Island, Togiak Bay, Cape Newnham, Nunivak Island, kind of marginal, Western Aleutians, marginal VFR, Adak, VFR. And for Anatuvik, tomorrow, Brooks Range, VFR from start to finish, either approach and Isabel, or Let's start in the western Alaska Range. Lake Clark, Merrill, and Rainy, all good VFR. Windy, ceilings visibility is unlimited, possibly for Isabel. VFR flying, or will be VFR for Isabel as well as Mentasta. All passes will be VFR for the flying tomorrow for western, or for any either approach or entrance there. Tanita, Portage, and Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels. Upper level high pressure, warm air aloft, 8,000 feet, north central interior, 6,000 out to the Arctic coast into the Gulf. And starting, got some colder air encroaching from the north and northeast, and then the upper trough over the Bering Sea. Starting to put a squeeze here on that upper level ridge. See 2,000 feet now in over the Alaska Peninsula. Icing, could be some areas of isolated, moderate, very isolated, rime into the Kodiak Island area across Alaska Peninsula. Maybe along the southwest coast, and then some mixed icing from the Pribilofs, light mixed icing down to the central Aleutians. And the jet stream showing upper level high pressure Gulf of Alaska into the interior, southerlies 55 knots on the western interior there, 65 knots north-northwest there into Canada, light over the Bering Sea except out west, 65 to 85 out of the north. And for 9,000 feet, low complex there around the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, 45 knot northeasterlies from the Pribilofs down toward Adak, and then south to southeast, 50 to 60 knotters there coming up to the Alaska Peninsula, just west of Kodiak, into the southwest interior, but really diminishing there up toward Norton Sound down to about 25 light winds elsewhere under the ridge axis, and including the Panhandle. 3,000 feet, much the same pattern there, southeast 40 to 50 knots coming into the Bristol Bay area. Easterlies turn northeast 40 to 45 knots there as they blow across the central Aleutians. Easterlies 25, eastern Arctic coast. With that, might be a little bit of light to isolated moderate chop there for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast. Considerable moderate, though, for the Aleutian Range, Alaska Peninsula, but cuts off of the western Alaska Peninsula. Kind of choppy for Adak and Atka, below about 5,000.
We can't just put the fires out because we can't put them out. We've tried that now for a century, and it doesn't work. It just makes the next one worse.
You may see a place like this and think, total devastation. And it's not your fault for thinking that.
But that depiction is, as we've learned from countless experts over the last 2 weeks, not the whole story, and not how you should think about wildfires.
The truth is, there are lots of types of habitats out west, and fire affects them all in unique ways. So it's important to start thinking about the big picture with wildland fires. So let's first rewind. To help us understand what's going on out west, Rob and I started calling up the experts, and what we found was that the story of fire, particularly in the west, is complex. So to understand it, we planned a road trip. Road trip time!
The goal of our road trip was to see as many forests as we could and meet experts around the region to help us understand the role fire plays out here. First destination was to find the forest burned by the now famous Great Fires of 1910. And at the heart of what is known as the Big Blow-Up, the logical first place to stop, the city of Wallace.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How's the day going?
Good. Haley and I are in this cute town of Wallace, Idaho, which was completely destroyed by the 1910 fires. You can see how much damage this fire actually did. Let's send up the drone and see what the surroundings look like now. What we found was a small town surrounded by a dense forest, with every single tree just over 100 years old.
So everything we see behind us now, that's all new growth since 1910.
And to help us put these historic fires and the forests around Wallace in perspective, we met up with historian Diane Smith.
This is Wallace, and here are your fires.
All of this is the 1910 fires.
This is not that unusual. The fact is, it just was at a time in our development as a country. We noticed it, we paid attention to it, and we got the national attention for it.
Right. As it turns out, these fires helped reinforce the idea at the time that every fire needed to be suppressed at all costs. And this suppression for so long has led to new problems, namely thick forests full of fuel. But don't just take my word for it. Let me show you the difference. Notice how different this place is than this one that has been thinned out quite heavily in the past, or like an area like this that's been burnt quite frequently. In fact, both of these areas show how many forests would have looked in the past under regular burns. The dead and low-growing material gets consumed easily by fire, very much unlike this forest, which has had fire suppression for over 100 years and could lead to a high-intensity fire.
And all of this dry, dead material, that's problematic.
So we went looking for a big fire and just followed the smoke. Oh gosh, a huge crown fire. I gotta get this. These high-intensity fires aren't great because in many forests they kill all the trees over a large area, even in forests that used to be very resistant to frequent fires. And nobody knows that better than the people that work in this particular forest.
There's green coming back, and I guess I've gotten somewhat used to it, and I still have hope that the entire Sierra Nevadas won't look like this, that we can maybe get ahead of it. So the fires nowadays can move from the surface right into the tree canopies really easily, where in the past, fires would have kept trees pruned, they would have kept fuel densities low, and so now you end up with a lot more high severity fires in the West than had a fire regime kept under its historic recurrence. This to me is more a lesson of fire exclusion and keeping fire out of the system. If we're keeping it out of when it would burn with a beneficial effect, it will burn, and the probability of it burning at an unbeneficial state is higher.
So again, this is where it's complicated. We thought if only we could stop the fires, we'd win the fight. But the fires like the King Fire here show that stopping the fires only made it worse. Add that to the fact that we're living closer than ever to these wild lands. So to help us understand the wildland-urban interface, we met up with CAL FIRE. And as we were pulling up to this neighborhood, one of the residents quickly came out to tell us about the latest fire.
Yeah, our biggest fear is fire. It was very scary. I mean, everybody was honking and get out, and you know, there's a fire.
This is the risk across California. The response piece alone isn't going to solve this challenge if the homeowners aren't organized.
Because we're all in the same boat. We're one match away from everybody losing everything. It's a real fear.
Literally, we could have that fire spread up in here within a matter of seconds.
Wow.
California is going to have fires. We're not going to stop all the fires in California, so we have to have an infrastructure that's fire resistant. We need to work on policies that help us engage in active management of our forest. That's using prescribed fire as a tool. It's all the things in the toolbox. It's a combination of managing our forest and a combination of protecting our communities that are in them.
If it wasn't complicated enough, this made it very clear that you can't just let the fires burn whenever they start. The forests need to be managed to help mitigate the risk to us. But using fire seems to be one of the keys to making things safer, and knowing the science behind fire is always key to implementing good management.
Fire Sciences Lab, right over here.
So we made a stop at the Missoula Fire Lab to try to understand what we know about fire.
You see the flames at the very top and how they're sticking to the slope?
They really are. Everybody's laying down.
They're laying down. Well, that's flame attachment. Actually a very difficult thing to understand.
Here at the Fire Lab, the scientists study the basics of fire. Understanding the complexities here helps firefighters and forest managers in the field better predict and fight wildland fires.
Fires are inevitable. The only choices that we really have is what kind of fire to have and when do we want it. And that's it. Almost? Ready. You're ready. Jason's ready.
Mark's team is prepping to light a huge bed of precisely cut cardboard.
You're not going to be in any danger. So when the lights go out, don't move. Gasoline.
This is one of many experiments they'll run to understand the physics of fire, how it moves, how it spreads, and all of this measured by precise scientific instruments and high-speed cameras. Tens of thousands of pieces of cardboard up in flames in mere seconds. The ongoing research will help us better understand fire with the ultimate goal that we can live better with it. But can we do that? There is one forest we knew of that seems to have figured out this coexistence with fire, a place where fires burn all summer, every summer. It's part of their way of life and a mentality we wanted to know about. And here we went out with our guides Frank Lake and Steve Valentine, who work with the local U.S. Forest Service and tribe to help keep a healthy forest.
This is perfect. The fires basically come through and cleared out the understory.
and all that's left are the trees.
Yeah, it's black and it's charred, and you just see a few of the earliest sprouts. But you come back in here a year, it's going to be alive again.
And to many, this may seem destroyed, but they view it differently here.
That fire's medicine, because it's not if it comes, it's when it comes. We need fire, and fire needs us.
You see, fire needs people to remind us how important fire is to the ecosystem. Frank and Steve's ancestors have been burning this forest for millennia. It's now part of what makes the forest special. They just want to make sure that it's not forgotten.
Basically, what you leave behind is what's important.
When they say this is your foods and your medicines, your sacred places, your springs, your water, that's essential, that's who we are as people. We have to learn to live with fire. We have to learn to respect fire. We have to maintain that security. That's why I do what I do.
Haisley and I have learned a lot on our journey. We've learned that fire is complicated, and it's not as black and white as we make it out to be, and it is an integral part of our forests. They've had fire running through them for thousands of years, and they will continue to have fire in them in the future. And we can't always put the fires out. We have to decide what kind of fires to live with. And that is why we need to work with these fire crews from around the country. We also need a public who understands the importance of fire on the landscape. A healthy forest, you see, is a forest that lives with fire.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at sea ice analysis for today. Not a lot of change from yesterday. Still breaking up there along the southwest coast into Kuskokwim Bay and expanding open water there on the southwest shore of Nunivak Island, and still some heavier ice north side of St. Matthew Island. But general slowly thawing trend for the next few days anticipated. So moving on to the coastal water forecast, we'll see light winds for the Panhandle tomorrow. Coming down from what they were today in Lynn Canal, where gusts 25-35 miles an hour. At Eldred Rock tomorrow, just northwest at 10, seas 2 feet. And that's forecast is good for all of the inside waters, right down to Dixon Entrance, south coast, to the outer coastline, south side, it's north at 10, and variable to northeast at 10 for the north coast, seas 5 to 6 feet. Outlook for Monday, southeast winds 10 knots from the north coast, and south winds 10 to 20 knots on the south coast there, with the strongest winds along Prince of Wales Island coastline, seas at about 6 feet. And central southern inside water, south to southeast breeze at 10 knots, 2 to 3 foot seas. But Lynn Canal back up out of the north to 20 knots with 4 foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, tomorrow, Sunday, northwest winds 10 knots. North Gulf Coast, light winds also northwest at 10 knots, seas 4 feet. Cook Inlet, northwest 10 knots with 2 foot seas. Kamishak Bay, the breeziest area, out of the east at 20 knots, seas 5 feet, and southeast 15 for the Barren Islands, with seas at around 4 feet. Those will increase to 20 knots for the Barren Islands on Monday, with seas building to 8 feet. Otherwise, the North Gulf Coast, easterlies at 15 knots, with 6 foot seas, and Prince William Sound, north at 10. Cook Inlet, north to northeast, 10 to 15 knots, northeast 15, Kamishak Bay. Kodiak Island, small craft advisories, east-northeasterlies tomorrow, 25 knots, with 7 to 8 foot seas. And then small craft advisories, Bristol Bay, for east winds at 30 knots, southeast 30 knots, Sitkinak to Castle Cape, and east-southeasterlies 20 to 25 knots for the Alaska Peninsula with 5 to 11 foot seas. And an increase in the winds, all areas on Monday, with 30 knot winds out of the northeast there for the Alaska Peninsula, 9 to 10 foot seas, and Bristol Bay, northeast 25 with seas at 5 feet, 40 knot winds from the east, with seas at 12 feet from Castle Cape to Sitkinak, and Kodiak Island, east-northeast, 30 knots sustained with 11 to 12 foot seas. Fox Islands, north to northeast, 10 to 25 knots tomorrow, lightest for Unalaska Island and strongest for Unmak Island, northwest 38 Akanatka, small craft advisors Amchitka Island, northwest at 25, Shimmy and Atu to Kiska, northwest at 20. West 15 there for the areas west of Amchitka Island, and gale warnings for Adak and Atka. Northerlies 35 knots. Unmak Island, north 35 knots for gale warnings. Unalaska Island, small craft advisories, north winds at 30 knots. Southwest coast, showing, south of Nunivak Island, east winds 30 knots. Northeast 25 for the Pribilof, seas at 7 feet there. North 20 for St. Matthew Island. 5 foot seas. Small craft advisories for the Yukon Delta coast. North 25, seas 6 feet. And for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, northeast at 10. And north 15 for Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island for Monday. And for the southwest coast, small craft advisories, north 25, 5 to 7 foot seas, northwest 25, St. Matthew Island. Pribilofs north at 30 with seas 10 feet. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, or actually the central and east side, easterlies 20 to 25 knots, coming down to 15 on the west side, and from Cape Beaufort to Wales, real light winds from the southeast, only at 5 knots. Those will go north at 10 knots on Monday from Wales to Cape Beaufort, and the western coast east at 15. Small craft or brisk wind advisories for the central and east side there, 25 to 30 knot winds, but from Kaktovik, say, to Demarcation Point, Barter Island, those areas, gale warnings, east winds, 35 knots with the tightening gradient. For tonight, winds are pretty light up that way, staying light under basically high pressure ridging into the Yukon, and the interior dry. Chance of showers, southwest coast, a little breezy, kind of breezy and wet for the Alaska Peninsula, showery for the Fox Islands to Atka, otherwise dry for the Panhandle. And for tomorrow, not much change. That low center there near the False Pass area, or Akun Island, just north of them. Troughs rotating around that, bringing surges of showers to the Alaska Peninsula, grazing the southwest coast back into the central Aleutians. Sunny over the interior. Not much change for Monday. Sunny and warm, interior Alaska. 50s and 60s, a little chillier North Slope Arctic coast. Nice over the Panhandle. Chance of rain, Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, and eastern Aleutians. High pressure building into the western Bering Sea. Not too bad there, with light winds, dry conditions, and a fair amount of clearing all the way up in toward the Bering Strait.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.